G'day, I'm Owen, you've joined the pub test, and this is the 8th video in our victim series, so if you are watching these as they get released, let's get straight into it. So the next person on this list is Elizabeth Stride, who many people consider to be the third official victim of Jack the Ripper, though this one is the most controversial as regards whether it should be included on this list, as we'll see at the end. And yet Elizabeth Stride was totally different to many of the others on this list. To start with, she wasn't actually English or even Irish, but she was born in Sweden. Now, I don't know much about Sweden at all. I think ABBA came from there and Muppet Chef. And that's as far as my knowledge on Sweden goes. So if you want to educate me on Sweden, then put that down in comments. But family weren't wealthy, but they weren't totally broke. But she seems to have had a connection to the Swedish church throughout her entire life, though it is stated, and I find this interesting, that she could read okay, but it was said that she never really understood the Bible at all. She managed to get some work through the church in some domestic capacity. Yet at some point, she turned to making money in other ways. So in 1865, so she would have only been 22 years old, she gets arrested for being a woman of the night. Sadly for her, two events happen here. One, she did contract a communicable disease, but worse is she did fall pregnant, and that baby didn't survive childbirth. Now, her reasons to emigrate to England are very dubious because she gave differing reports as to why she was going to go to England. But it could have been this loss of the child that really affected her emotionally, and she just wanted a fresh start. So in 1866, she does emigrate to England, basically making these connections with the Swedish church over there as well. But then in 1869, she marries a person by the name of John Stride. And it seems that this was quite a good relationship, at least for a few years, because they ran a cafe or coffee shop together from 1870 to 1875. And during that time, they actually changed the location of the business. And that would have taken a fair bit of work and effort, but obviously it was successful. And then someone in 1875 took that business over. Things get very strange here, because we don't really know much detail what happened between 1875 and 1878. But in 1878, a massive event happened. Two ships, the Princess Alice and the Bywell Castle, collided, and 600 to 700 people lost their lives. They really don't know because there was no solid manifest of who was on those boats at the time. But Elizabeth Stride says that she was on that boat herself with her husband and children. So she tries to climb the mast to get up out of this sinking ship, and she gets kicked in the teeth, and she loses all her teeth on the bottom jaw. But she says, sadly, her husband and children passed away in that accident, which would be absolutely dreadful if that was true, because there is absolutely no record that John and Elizabeth had any kids. In fact, they're recorded as having no children. And what's more, John Stride didn't die until 1864 of heart disease. So was she even on that boat? Yes, it is true she had no teeth on her bottom jaw. How that happened? Well, even the doctors themselves at her autopsy really couldn't explain it. But what we do know is her and John were separated at this point. But she may have told this story to get money from the church, because she was receiving support from time to time, as we will see. But in around 1881, she's in the workhouses, in and out around the Whitechapel area. But then in 1885, she meets a man, or at least starts living with a bloke, Michael Kidney. So in 1885, she's now living with a bloke, Michael Kidney. But their relationship was rocky at the very best, we would say. He says that Elizabeth, or Long Liz, as her nickname was getting into the drink a bit. And when she had the drink, she was a bit more boisterous than normal, and that would be true, as we will see as we go through. He said he tried to help her because she'd go off at night and he'd not see her for a while, and she'd come home drunk if she came home at all. So he thought he'd be helpful and lock her in the house to protect her from herself. And interestingly, a padlock was actually found on her body. She accuses him of domestic assault, and he goes to court. She doesn't turn up to court, so that gets thrown out. But in the 20 months prior to her death, she's arrested at least 8 times and goes before the court for drunk and disorderly behaviour with obscene language. But what is really of interest is in September of 1888, both on the 15th and the 20th, she's gone to the Swedish church and they have provided her with some money. But now on September the 29th, and I'd suggest it's the 29th because of what happens next, she's cleaning some rooms at the lodging house where she was staying. She gets paid by a person, Elizabeth Tanner, and they both go off to drink at 6:30 p.m. Now they're at the Queen's Head pub, not for very long because she's seen back at the lodging house between 7 and 8, and then she's leaving. And most people say that she was in good spirits. She wasn't drunk or disorderly at all. The next suggested sighting of her is 2 labourers are going into the Bricklayers Arms pub. They see Long Liz and a bloke leave. He's described as short, dark moustache, and sandy eyelashes. I find all those details, well, at least that last detail, very intriguing because it was dark. It was 11 p.m. at night. And you got 2 labourers just walking into a pub and you're going to pay that much attention to another bloke's eyelashes? I find that odd. But anyway, that was the description they gave. But then at 11:45, she's next seen on Burner Street talking to some bloke. And I say talking, but yeah, carrying on a bit, getting rather up close and personal, we would say, with a bloke who has a sailor hat on. But then almost an hour later, around 12:35, PC Smith sees Elizabeth Stride with what I would say a different bloke, a 28-year-old bloke, had a waistcoat and a deerstalker hat and was carrying a parcel wrapped in newspaper. But only 10 minutes later, a bloke by the name of Israel Swartz sees a bloke pushing a woman to the ground. He doesn't want to get involved, and that seems to be a bit of a common thread back then, so he crosses the street, but then he sees another bloke lighting a pipe, and then he's apparently called out something along the lines of Lipsky, and Israel does not want to hang around. So he starts walking away, but the guy with the pipe starts following him, so he says that he just books it, like he's running for his life, and the bloke doesn't catch up with him. He's dragged in when they have Elizabeth Stride at the mortuary, and he says, yeah, no, that was the person I saw being attacked. But that was a totally different description to what PC Smith saw only 10 minutes prior. So if his statement is true, we may have two people last seen with Elizabeth Stride. So at 1 a.m. in the morning, a jewellery salesman goes into Dutfield Yard. Except his horse wouldn't go in. He kept rearing back. So he's wondering what's going on. So he gets his whip, because he had a whip, and he's ferreting around in the ground because he said it was pitch black, could not see a thing, finds a body. He thinks someone's probably either sleeping or drunk. So he goes into the building. People come out. They find Elizabeth Stride. She's passed away. They call the doctor, and at 1:16, he pronounces her dead on the scene. And only her throat was cut. And I say only, I know that's absolutely dreadful, but it wasn't the same as the other Ripper crimes. Now, this jewelry salesman says he believes that the Ripper was in that yard because that's why the horse kept acting so weird. And no doubt when he went into the building, the Ripper got away. And hence why no further injuries were inflicted on Elizabeth Stride. Now, before the press could respond to this particular crime, and before the police could even get their hands on this properly, another attack is going to happen in Whitechapel that very evening. So that's the story of Elizabeth Stride. I'd be very fascinated to know what you think of this one. Was Israel Schwartz's eyewitness testimony accurate? If so, that just raises lots and lots of questions. Like, again, was Jack the Ripper a single solitary person, or were they working with someone else? Could it have been the gangs? But if his testimony isn't accurate, well, we really need to look at the bloke carrying something wrapped up in newspaper. Who was he? Because that was only 25 minutes before Elizabeth Stride's body was found. And according to the jewelry salesman, she couldn't have been there very long. Thank you very much for watching. It genuinely is appreciated. And if you want to help the pub test out, hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. If you already have done so, thank you so much. That is also genuinely appreciated. I'm Owen. You've been watching the pub test, and we will see you on the next one.